Now it is time to introduce our speakers. Robert Nordland is the president of Association Reserves and a registered professional engineer. Robert is also a certified reserve specialist, was involved in creating National Reserve Study standards, and has greatly influenced this industry for the past 30 years. He regularly writes on the topic of reserve studies and speaks at industry functions throughout the nation. Association Reserves has prepared over 45,000 reserve studies for association-governed communities in all 50 states. Robert is often called to serve as an expert witness in litigation involving reserve issues. Since 1997, Julie Adamen has been president of Adamen, Inc., a consulting and employment firm specializing in the community management industry. Julie is also a nationally known author, publisher, speaker, and educator in the community association management industry. She is known for publishing the HOA Manager Newsline, an industry newsletter with a monthly circulation of over 17,000, and is the producer of the Manager Minute, a series of popular short videos now available on YouTube. And now I'd like to turn the floor over to Robert Nordland. Robert?
Well, thank you very much, Paige, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for today's webinar. I'm here with Julie. Julie, can I get you to say hello, please?
Well, you certainly can. Hello, everyone. Hello, Robert.
Thank you. Well, it's good to be here. It's even better to be able to share some of our time and experience to help all our listeners here today, because budgeting can be a hazardous task. All year, you're handling board members or other board members, owners, and the association's business partners, and that's great for those of you with great people skills, but every year you have a season of time when you go through the process of making some very important financial decisions. For the majority of you, we learned, is December 31st, and those financial decisions, those budget decisions, have significant consequences for the association's upcoming year, and those consequences can either be good consequences or bad ones. Now, those decisions are usually very well documented. They're part of the budget, so you want them to be wise, not foolish. We're going to be truth speakers here today, Julie and I, helping you understand what success looks like, what the attributes are, and I guess a bottom line of what we've come to the conclusion about as we were preparing for this session is this is so much more than numbers. So if your strength is working with people and not numbers, you have a big advantage over just those who think it's just about numbers. So next year, and those expenses, they're going to come. They're inevitable. And today's session is about arming you with specific objectives, hazards to avoid, and helpful hints so you can steer your association, guide your association towards a successful future, kind of like how this sailor's grabbing the wheel, with a grin on your face and confidently knowing where you're going, how you're going to get there, and that you will arrive safely even if the water's a bit rough. But first, a few notes about today's session. I hope you're ready to take notes. You've got some paper and pen there, because in this preparation, Julie and I felt we had some great tips to share, some real truth speaking, filling in the holes of things that you may not know, some tips of the trade, the kind of training that isn't really readily available anywhere else. But like all our webinars, we're recording this session, so it will be available on YouTube and on the Association Reserves website for future playback. Another great resource is an outline that we'll send to everyone who fills out a brief survey at the end of today's session. So if you give us some feedback, we'll give you our thanks with a written outline of the program. Now, this is a live presentation, and everyone, as Paige has indicated, has been muted to keep the background noise to a minimum, but Julie and I like to hear from you. So if you came with a question, or if any time during today's session a question comes to mind, by all means, type it in the dialog box. It's probably to the right on your screen that looks like the picture I'm showing in the middle. And Paige is going to be monitoring that through today's session and picking from those at the end. And then feedback. Show me that you're ready to get started. Grab your mouse and click the hands raised icon that's on your control panel. That will look like what you see in the middle of your screen. So give me a hands raised click and let me know that you're with me and ready to go. And I'm scrolling up and down the list. Everyone is ready. Okay, I'm going to click hands down, and Julie, we are off to the races. So tell me, what are the attributes of a successful budget? What's a successful budget look like?
Well, I think the main attribute is the association actually has the cash it needs to function properly. So don't forget, all you board members out there, your primary responsibility is to, four things, remember this: preserve, protect, maintain, and enhance the assets of the association. Notice I didn't say maintain the status quo or minimize assets, or minimize assessments. Keeping them artificially low is not an attribute of a successful budget. Now, for the managers that are out there, you assist the board in this process by reminding them from your experience how smoothly other associations operate when they have enough cash on hand, and cash on hand I mean operating and reserves, to function, to avoid financial scarcity. And when there's financial scarcity, what happens? Political tension. And of course, special assessments leading to more political tension. So that is the number one thing. The association has the cash on hand. Which of course means that you're not hoping that the year coming up that you're budgeting for is nothing's going to go wrong and we're going to leave assessments in stasis. We're just going to hope that no disaster strikes, or hope that the utility prices don't go up, or that kind of thing. So remember, you have to have this type of money on hand so projects get taken care of, the bills get taken care of, and contingencies are planned for. Now, another aspect that we don't really talk about in the budgeting process is that as you budget successfully, remember success, you have enough cash to operate, that means that you as a board and you as management staff have all kind of trained, if you will, once again I have the air quotes going on when I say trained, your homeowners to expect a certain level of increase in assessments yearly. As an industry, we recommend that you increase assessments 3 to 4, what is it, Robert, 3-4% a year?
2, 3, 4, 5% a year. Yes.
Yeah, just to keep up with inflation and how the costs go up. You know, I mean, look at, if you are in any one of the states or locales where the minimum wage has been raised to $10 to $12, $13 an hour, all of your vendors are going to have to up the price of while they up their price to you, because they have to pay their labor more. So just pretending that doesn't exist doesn't work. But when you raise assessments just a little bit every year, everybody gets used to it much better than having to raise 15%. And lastly, the hallmark of a successful budgeting board is communication, is transparency. All the owners should know where their dollars are going. They should be brought into that process by frequent communication about the financial status of the community and as the budgets are being prepared. When people are a part of that process through communication, they feel a part of the consensus, and they're usually not part of the angry mob that shows up at the next annual meeting.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm spending my time writing some notes down here. You got me taking notes. I can move to the next slide and help me summarize. Okay, what we're talking about here, attributes for success, cash to function. So yes, the numbers do count, but make sure they're the right numbers. Make sure the association does have the cash it needs to thrive. Don't starve it for the fuel or the oxygen it needs to function. And when I hear you talking about the owners paying the true cost, that's not being just hopeful. Now, wishful thinking and being optimistic is great, but budgeting is a time to not be crossing your fingers, closing your eyes, and hoping. We want the owners to be paying the true cost of living in the association. Some associations are more expensive than others. It's just the reality. And then a little bit at number 3, I heard you talk about training. Again, getting back to, it's not just the numbers, it's giving the homeowners an expectation that as we live in a real world with costs going up, in the real world, the homeowner assessments are going to go up. If they know that they're going to go up a little bit each year, they're not going to be surprised when they go up next year.
And they can budget for it as well. They can budget for it as well.
Absolutely. Now, if you're on a fixed mortgage, I expect my mortgage payments to stay the same, but that's because I made a deal with the bank to have fixed mortgage. But there's no such thing as a fixed homeowner assessment. It does no one any good to give your owners the expectation that they are fixed. They need to float. help the owners to know that they're going to pay the true cost, expecting those annual adjustments. That's going to work in your favor. And then, Julie, another way to say that it's more than just the numbers. Communication, the political process, the salesmanship, the feedback, the communication cycles. It doesn't mean you have to be a public speaker. You can put something in the newsletter. You can casually talk about it when you're at the pool or in the laundry room, just making sure that owners are aware this is a real thing. It's going on. We hear you when you talk about the hallways being a little dingy. Yes, we're going to increase the janitorial service to 3 times a week instead of 2. Just wonderfully being a human in the process and understanding that it's a lot more than just having income match the expenses. But let me segue from there, and as I talk about process, how does a board go through a successful process, or what are the successful process steps to have these attributes of success?
Well, number one is start the budget process early. That means 6 months before the fiscal year end. Now, for the managers out there, I can hear your eyeballs rolling in the back of your head. No, I'm not doing that. Well, let me tell you, when you have 6, 7, or 8 budgets, if you, or 9 or 10, no matter how many you do, and they all have a 12/31 fiscal year end, starting early gives you enough time to do all of the diligence, your due diligence that you need to do to prep those budgets. So if you start in June with those, it doesn't mean you have to have them done. I'm just saying just start it. Just start it. And that means you have all the time to get the information that you need. So in June, you want to look back 8 to 12 months for the last expenses and start then. Everything takes, I just can't emphasize this enough. Everything takes longer than you think. And actually, all you managers out there, you know that. But for the budget process, everybody seems to like to procrastinate about it. And then you're all just cramming in October and November. It's very difficult. Oh, and one thing about starting early, if you're having to do a reserve study or an update, call the reserve study guys ahead of time, right, Robert? Right. Not in November?
Yeah. It's when someone calls me in late November and says, can you do me a favor and turn this around in 1 week? I say, well, if you can convince the 237 people in line before you to all step aside, but yeah, advanced timing really helps.
It's one of the biggest problems is where people fail to call the reserve study company ahead of time, and I mean way ahead of time, like April or May. And so the next thing I would say is you got to do all your homework, your research. You start doing that in June. That means you need to talk to your landscapers. You need to talk to the roofing company that is doing your roof maintenance, the pool company, get a hold of the utilities, either look on their websites or do some research on where costs are going to be in the following year. Again, like if you're one of those locales where you know that minimum wage is going to go up 4% or 5% or 6% in the coming year, you need to have that built in because all of your vendors are going to have to pay more. And then once you've got these figures, you prepare the preliminary budget. Now that might happen in July, might happen mid-July, but here's something else to think about when you're starting this early. I know you guys think it's too early, but what happens in those months, July, August, September? Board members go on vacation. Budget committee members go on vacation. So you may have everything ready and you're still sitting there waiting. So, or you may not have everything ready and the board or the committee members are ready to meet in July, but you're not going to have it ready till August, but they're all gone in August. So another reason to start early. And the last thing is make sure and follow up. Provide margin for unknowns, which means delinquencies and any odd surprises. Now, I don't mean this as a slush fund. I'm just saying that you need to have a certain percentage to prepare for the unknown. It's kind of a belt and suspenders type of thing. And last thing, don't expect this process to be perfect. That's why one of the reasons we start so early. The process isn't perfect. The budget isn't going to be perfect. This is nothing to stress out about or live and die on. But what you are trying to do is get the association have enough cash to operate and to fund its reserves for the following year.
Julie, if everyone was paying attention, they saw that I got behind on advancing the slides, and that's because I'm sitting here. I know this material. I've heard you teach it before. That's why you're on the show today, but I'm here taking notes because I'm just captivated by the way you're putting things together. Starting early, it gives the association time, it gives the association options, gives them the chance to do a public forum if they need to, a special meeting, put an article in the newsletter. Like you said, if you start early enough, you can find out, oh, it's been long enough that we need to have another on-site reserve study. It gives you options, gives you choices. Doing your homework, we get right back to the numbers. You need to know what the numbers are. What did you go over budget on? What was under budget? You have to know those kinds of things. Preparing the draft, it gets back to the human factors where you realize, how's it starting to shape up? Am I going to have to put my salesmanship shoes on? Where am I going to have to make changes to make it better this year? Because remember, that tripped us up last year. And finally, the following up, the finishing it, adjusting it, maybe some trade-offs. We can do this year, we can do this next year. But again, those human factors, they're so much more than just, does income match expenses? And
the human factor is everything.
Yeah.
You know, it's the human. That's always the that's always the kink. You know, that's always the kink in the chain. Because you know, I call our industry, and all of you board members. I'm a board member myself. All of you managers out there, you'll get this. I call this life on the bomb squad, because all we're dealing with are human beings. If we only had to deal with numbers, this would be a piece of cake.
Oh, right. Yeah, easy.
With the human beings around it. Yep.
Easy. Okay. Next portion of the program is problems to avoid. It can sound simple, make the income match the expenses, but it's just not. So, Julie, what are the biggest problems to avoid?
Again, the biggest problem to avoid is do not budget for what you want things to be, budget for how they are. That if you're budgeting for what you want it to be, that is pursuing the wrong goal. The right goal is, how much money do we need to operate our association efficiently and effectively and fund our reserves at the same time. The number two thing I would say is the lack of institutional knowledge or corporate memory, especially with associations that are managed by a management company and their manager is a portfolio manager who may have 5, 6, 7, 8 accounts. Well, in our industry, unfortunately, it's just the nature of the beast that some associations and management companies will experience high turnover. So an association may have 4 managers in 5 years. So a lot of times that institutional knowledge goes away as their notes go away, or maybe they didn't have them. Same with board members. So the managers rotate out, the board members rotate out. Without that corporate knowledge, it's very difficult to budget, because you have to think longer than this year. You kind of got to look back as well as look forward. And the next one, of course, without looking forward, is not planning ahead. Again, everything takes time. When it's life on the bomb squad, we're dealing with people who have issues, or you have, meaning they can't meet, or somebody got sick, or we're on vacation, or you're going to have to raise assessments. And that's a real, and you know it's going to be a political sticky wicket, as of course it is, because we are homeowners association business, you know. There's nothing too small to gripe about. So because you know it is all going to take more time. And the sooner you start planning, is the more time you are able to communicate to the owners and the residents, communicate with the boards, communicate back and forth between the budget committee and the board, and you have all of this time, and get your reserve study done, be able to get all that information you need. That is absolutely paramount. We call that back timing. You always want to back time. The worst thing in the world and the most stressful is to wait till the last minute. And another thing to think about, and we don't think about this too much because we're so desperate for volunteers in many associations, is putting the right person in the right place if you have a volunteer budget or financial committee who is working on this, whether you're self-managed or whether you have a management company, regardless. Always think that I want to put the right volunteers in the right spot, and if you have a CPA, it's probably not good to put him or her on the social committee. Put them on the finance committee, where they understand the numbers and they can get a grip on the big picture of the community's finances.
And vice versa. Course,
absolutely, because you know they wouldn't necessarily be all that fun maybe handling the social committee, but you know I'm not stereotyping, but sort of. God love them. Also, last thing I'm saying is missing information. If you don't have the right information, like you don't have your year-to-date expenses or income, and you don't have a reserve study, if you don't have a reserve study or an update, you are operating without the information that you need to create an effective and efficient budget that's going to meet all your needs, not going to leave you stranded anywhere, not going to leave you in musical chairs where you guys all running around, while the music's playing, and one of you won't be left standing up without a chair. You got to have all these things in place. budget for those upcoming expenses. And, you know, when you are talking about reserve studies, don't, let's see, get an update when you're supposed to, or even if you're not necessarily required by your state law, I still would recommend you have your reserve study done and get an update, what, Robert, every 3 years? Depending?
We have some good statistics on it. Basically, special assessments go down. Markedly, special assessments go down when associations update their reserve study annually. So don't just wait around to what the state minimum is. There's some real benefit to the association of knowing your numbers. The reserve contribution numbers are often big ones, and staying on top of those numbers is of benefit to the association.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Again, I've got, I'm scrambling. My outline here is full of notes. What I saw here, common problems to avoid the wrong goal. Part of that is a little bit of a cultural and role playing. One thing I'm very taken with is that there's two different types of people here. Homeowners have options. Homeowners have the ability to make choices. What am I going to do with my budget? Am I going to like being in this association? Am I going to be supportive or complaining? Yet the board has a job. The board has one job, and that's to run the association. So they can't say, I wish, because their job is to give the association the money that it needs. And so understand that the board has a job to do. It's to run the association. There are going to be people who complain or push back when you say the association needs more.
No, really? In our business?
Well,
people are going to complain? No.
In case people haven't heard about that yet. And then there's, as Julie said, the forgetfulness, the lack of institutional knowledge. That can be as simple as just having a notebook, reminding yourself what happened last year, how many times you had to get snow plowed, the difference in water prices, the difference in just tracking and trending, lack of foresight. Julie had that number one comment that you have to start early. Everything takes time. You just can't deny the calendar moves forward every day. Unsuccessful delegation, getting the right people. Yes, you need someone with numerical skills, but you also need someone who can sell a budget, someone who understands the pulse of the association, someone who has listened to the complaints about the lobby just doesn't look sharp, or no one uses the library section of the rec room. Can we repurpose it to something else? Just someone who's aware of what's going on and who can have success in this task. And then the missing information. Again, that may be a little bit of the forgetfulness. What were the expenses last year? Oh, there's so much reason to have a good year-to-date budget, to look at last year's year-to-date budget, and to know really what your facts are. It's kind of like a roadmap. You need to know where you are before you can plan where to go into the future. So getting all those things together, those are the problems I see. Have we missed anything there?
You know, something we didn't talk about this time, but I think we should bring it up because this always happens to boards. First of all, everyone wants to be empathetic as a board member. You have to have empathy with your fellow homeowners. And unfortunately, what happens in associations is, you know, as time marches on and people may get older and they are no longer, and become on a fixed income, where 25 years ago or 20 years ago, they were working out in the work world. Now they're on a fixed income, and the hard truth is they may not be able to afford the assessments any longer.
Yeah, they're nice Mrs. Johnson on the third floor.
Yeah, and it's a fact of life. I mean, it's just like Robert and I were speaking earlier. I mean, I live in a homeowners association. I'm on my own board, but we're big. We are all on an acre. And, you know, there will come a time when we cannot maintain this size property, and that means we're not going to be able to afford to live here. It's no different than Mrs. Johnson on the third floor or Mr. Jones who's over at Unit 2B. If they can, keeping your assessments artificially low for a small percentage of people who truly may not be able to afford to live there any longer is not your charter. Your charter is to preserve, protect, maintain, and enhance the assets for the whole community, for the future, for the present of your association. So I just want to make that point because we talked about it earlier.
Yeah. There's just two roles. The board member has the job. We don't want you to not be human. We want you to be sad that Mrs. Johnson, who's been there 20 years and was one of the original owners, may have to sell. But I bet she was one of the original owners who bought it from the developer for 50 grand, and it's probably worth 325,000 now. And if making the current homeowner assessment monthlies are a little tough for her, maybe it is time for her to sell and find somewhere that suits her at this stage in her life. Yeah, but
I find this to be, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, be a human. You can be sad for Mrs. Johnson, but your job is to run the association.
I will tell you, I find it in the associations that I do consulting with, I find this to be the biggest push-pull in associations are the people who've lived there since the development, came on board in 1985 or 1980, and then the new people that have moved in. So there's always the people who want to keep it, well, this is the way it's always been, and this is the way I want it. And then you have newer people who are still in the workforce thinking, no, we want to upgrade it, we want to upgrade. It's quite the conundrum, and the industry is facing it everywhere.
Yeah, I had one association where the treasurer was the retired gentleman, captain of industry, but clearly a retired older gentleman at this time, and he signed when the new carpet was delivered, and they delivered the wrong stuff. But he has very poor eyesight, and he accepted the wrong stuff. And that was one of those multiple examples of the wrong task for the wrong person. And someone who's really living in the past and needs a different living situation. The people at the association wanted something different, and the majority, that association continues to move into the future, and that one gentleman is getting left behind. And you have to appreciate that you're running the association, you're not maintaining a museum for Mrs. Johnson on the third floor.
Exactly. And I know that may sound harsh to some of you out there. Believe me, I'm empathetic about it. We all are, but this is the hard reality. Robert and I and industry professionals live this every single day. And so I understand, but he's right. It's the harsh realities.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about positive things, helpful hints. What are some tools of the trade or tips of the trade?
First thing, everybody, remember, what is the goal? The goal is to have enough cash on hand to run the association and enough to fund reserves appropriately. That means keep your eye on the ball. Don't get distracted by the naysayers or that 10%, the 10% vocal minority, and then there's really about 5% that are the really, really vocal minority. You can't get sidetracked by those people. So remember, you have to deal with the truth of the expense history and the projected increases as they come up. You can't live in fantasy. And number two on that, if you're going to have a successful budgeting process, you must communicate with your owners, especially, of course, assessments should increase every year, but always communicate. Email blasts or e-newsletters or regular newsletters on the website, and I don't mean just once. I mean maybe once, maybe twice a month. You might have to hold town halls if you're raising it more than 15% or 10%. I mean, some associations, they can hardly take even 10%. I worked with an association down in the Palm Springs area that had a very difficult time with they hadn't raised assessments in about 20 years.
Ouch.
And,
ouch.
Oh yes, very, very painful. And this new board came in, they knew they had to do it, and they ended up not only having town halls on Sunday afternoons, because there was a lot of out-of-towners. Sunday afternoons, board members would take turns holding a chat. So they would go to the clubhouse and field questions for an hour and a half. And I'm telling you, they were brave because there were a lot of slings and arrows, but that was a huge part of how they communicated with the owners about what was going on financially. Next thing is to start early. Again, back to that 6-month window. It's my favorite thing because remember, take this away, life on the bomb squad. Anything could blow up at any time. It's much better to be prepared early in case something does blow up. And hey, managers, if it doesn't blow up, then you got your budgets done early. Yay! And for you homeowners, if you board members out there who are homeowners, have a long-term perspective. So have a multi-year perspective. I mean, because if you look at what's gone on in the past, you look at what's going to happen, what happened this year, and you project down the road of where we're actually going to be by working in reality, working with the real numbers and not with our wishful thinking, that will set you up for success yearly. So, and remember this, let's just say you have your reserve study done and you realize, oh my God, we really need to raise assessments 30%, 35% or 40%. Well, you know you're not going to get that done in 1 year. They'd have to vote on it. That's such a big increase. It would never happen. Take a multi-year approach to that. Like if you have to raise it $10 this year or $15 this year and $20 the next year, have that long-range planning in your mind. And by the way, if you're not holding yearly planning sessions with the board, that's a board members, or have a facilitator to come in and do that, you're really missing out, because it's a real team building exercise, but it also provides the foundation for that multi-year look at your community, not just financially, but the whole community, which of course it typically boils down to the financials and then how the people issues are around that. Lastly, again, budget for the majority of the owners. You have to preserve, protect, maintain, enhance. We're not budgeting for the 10 people that show up and, bust your chops every board meeting. You just have to, everybody has to let that roll off their back. It comes with the territory. I wrote an article last month and I said, those of us who've been in the business for, nigh on to 30 years for me, I know that's hard to believe, really hard for me to believe, but we've developed pretty thick skins. Managers who've been in the business 20 years or so, they've developed pretty thick skins, otherwise they never would have been in it. Board members, it's a little more difficult because it's right in your neighborhood, but you have to realize the bigger picture is keeping the association running efficiently, keeping property value up, and not budgeting for the nasty guy who lives in, Unit 7 down here on the end. You can't do it. You have to budget for the majority and for the good of the community. Don't forget, you are fiduciaries, you are trustees. That means you're being placed in a position of financial trust on behalf of others.
Right. Okay. Again, I could just read the slide, but let me get my notes here. Focus on the goal, cash on hand for the needs of the association. There's a human factors, obviously, but give the association the cash it needs to thrive. And if the association thrives, you're going to have a majority of owners that are happy. Communication, it's not just numbers. All those human factors. What are we doing? What do we need? What's the pulse of the association? Starting early and learn the steps, know what to do. Basically stack, what I hear Julie saying is stack the odds in your favor. If you start late, there's so many things you just don't have time to do. You don't have time for a town hall. You don't have time to get an article in a newsletter. You don't have time for all these things. So stack the odds in your favor by starting early.
Help yourself.
Oh, gee, yes.
Help yourself.
Right. Having a multi-year plan, I see from the reserve study side of things, so many associations that are older, 10, 20 plus years older, it's hard for those associations to change course overnight. And you know what? They don't have to change course overnight. You can't solve a multi-year problem in 1 year. So take the 2, 3, 4, 5-year view and start making the association turn, start turning the direction, start responding really to the people who've been buying into it. Look at who's at the association. Look honestly at what the needs of the association are. And that goes right into the next one, dealing with the truth. What is happening? What are the expenses there? Don't repeat the failures and the mistakes from the past. And then budget for the majority. There may have been a set of people who bought in 20 years ago. They're probably not the same ones who are there now. And not only that, but the vocal minority. By all means, acknowledge them, acknowledge their value as owners, thank them for their insights, their comments, their opinions, and then move on and run the association. Is that fair? Is that safe to say?
I would say that's very safe to say.
Okay. All right. Well, looking at the time, we're trying to cram a whole lot of material into a small amount of time, but I want to point you to some additional resources we have. And what I'm excited for is that Julie's not just here as a one-time webinar guest speaker. She is doing a whole new program through her company, Adamen Inc. Julie, can I get you to tell everyone what you're doing?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So some of you managers out there may have seen this because we've put it out in the newsletter a couple of times, but I have a new series of online courses called Community Association Management 101. You can go to our website here, which is www.adamen-inc.com. Go to the Education tab, and it will tell you all about it. It is the soup to nuts of association management, from the absolute basics way up into how to deal with difficult people, budgeting, how to read reserve studies. It's intended for the brand new person to the industry, but I will tell you there's a tremendous amount of valuable information for board members out there as well. So if you go to my website, take a look at it. I think you'll all be pleased, and we finally are answering this need, because you know what? There's nobody out there in the industry to hire with experience anymore. You got to hire people off the streets, so you have to give them this kind of information so they can sit at their desk and know what they're looking at. Same for board members. Board members rotate in and out. Most of them get on a board, and how they got on the board was they walked out of the room and someone voted them in, and they're like, what? I'm on the board now. But this is a really good tool for them as well. So check it out. I'd appreciate everybody's feedback.
Yeah, Julie's offering this new service, new program, so you can get set up for success, so you don't have to wait around for next March when your local CAI chapter does a introductory program. You can get it right when you need it, and it's very directed, very focused. And then at Association Reserves, we have for years, for just over 30 years now, been helping associations responsibly plan for the inevitable expenses in their future. Basically, what we do is set associations up for an improved future. You can go to our website, reservesay.com, see more resources in our Learning Center. You can request a proposal. You can sign up for our email newsletter. Lots of good things. But at this point in time, I want to wrap. I want to let you know that we are here to help. We've got the voices of experience, years of experience, and we're here to help associations get towards a successful future, to guide you forward. We don't want you to struggle. We don't want you to flail. We want you to have peaceful, productive communities. And that pretty much wraps up our program today on budgeting for success. We want you to have the tools, the insights, the hints to be able to help your association get to an improved future without all your hair turning gray. So at this point in time, let me turn the program over to Paige, who will handle our Q&A time. Paige.
Thank you, Robert and Julie.